About 40% of this property is underwater right now compared to what it was originally.
Well, Prince Edward Island's always experienced coastal erosion, but it's highly vulnerable because it's essentially just a large sandbar.
Every year I put markers in, so in the spring I can see how much land is gone.
It just seems to be getting worse. I mean, it seems like land is going, we're losing more and more every year.
Hello, I'm Tom Murphy. Welcome to Land and Sea. Maritimers know all too well the immense power of the sea and the damage it does to our majestic coastlines. Every year, with every storm, a bit of our coast disappears. Now, with rising sea levels and intense storms fueled by climate change, the pace of erosion is growing, and nowhere is that more evident than on Prince Edward Island. Wherever you stop along Prince Edward Island's 4,000 kilometers of coastline, the views rarely disappoint. From sprawling sand dunes and pristine beaches to the iconic red clay cliffs, the coast is what attracts thousands of tourists every year. But every year, that coast gets a little smaller.
So you remember when we came here first, just as kids?
Yeah.
Hard to believe all the changes.
For the past 60 years, Dan and Brian McCaskill have seen firsthand the devastating impact erosion has had on their family's property in Savage Harbor on the island's north coast.
It was after one of these storms and all our sand dunes here were gone. You know, I mean, it was totally shocking because it's just not something you really expected. You knew eventually it would happen, but it was still very shocking and traumatic, you know, to see it all gone.
And it's not just sand dunes. Over the years, the pounding surf, winter storms, and hurricanes have washed away almost half their family's property.
About 40% of this property is underwater right now compared to what it was originally. It used to be almost 3 acres, and we're down to about 1.5 acres or less. Here's a collage of pictures that gives you a context here of some of the changes since the 1960s. This shot shows my mom and dad's cottage and the neighbor's cottage. So both of those are gone. So 50 feet plus the sand dunes and another 40 to 50 feet beyond that is now gone.
In 2022, Hurricane Fiona ripped through Atlantic Canada, leaving a wide path of destruction. It also took huge chunks out of the shoreline. Brian McCaskill lost another 25 feet in front of his cottage.
The erosion for the shore was roughly about where this puddle is, over to the tree. So that whole piece, about 25, 30 feet, was totally taken away.
Sadly, he knows he too may have to move.
It's probably more depression than anything, but you know, having lived here so long and seen what's happening to the whole shoreline and property, I mean, it's just inevitable. The sea takes what it wants, and all we can do is try and slow it down a bit. The objective is to try and stay in this cottage as long as we can, but we do realize at some point it has to be moved. And you know, that'll be maybe in my lifetime, I'm not sure, we'll see.
Further up the coast, Lennox Island First Nation is home to about 300 Indigenous islanders. Their island home in Malpeque Bay is just above sea level, making it extremely vulnerable to erosion and rising seawaters.
I'm extremely worried about it. I think that, you know, it's very obvious that climate change is real, and coastal erosion on Lennox Island has had dramatic impacts in our lands. We're losing lands every time there's a storm or Fiona knocked out another 100 feet in some areas of our community. So I'm gravely concerned.
Darlene Bernard is the chief of Lennox Island First Nation.
During Fiona, some of our families who live just on the coast back here, they were worried their houses were going to slide off into the river. It was that bad, like it was scary for them, and you know, and it was scary for me. I was looking at whitecaps in my backyard. So, you know, and I think that, you know, as we move forward, there's going to be more and more storms that are going to cause more and more damage. So we need to start dealing with this.
Lennox Island is no stranger to the impacts of climate change. In 2010, a severe storm knocked out the causeway to the community.
The causeway, half of it washed away and fell into the ocean, but that was our main point of contact with the mainland. So that's our food security, our medical assistance, anything that comes onto the island, our main source of transportation. So that's when we woke up to the fact that we had to start adapting to climate change.
Randy Angus is with the P.E.I. Mi'kmaq Confederacy. He's working with Lennox Island to find ways to adapt.
So this is the sewage treatment plant for Lennox Island. It was put in around 15 years ago, and it's a biological method of cleaning the water. Right now the tide is quite low, so we see it quite a ways away from the edge of this road, but we've seen the tide with the wind blowing the right way and accelerated sea level rise. We've seen the water come right up to the edge of this road. Once it crosses the road, we're into our sewage system, and then if there's a breach on this road, we would actually have raw sewage coming down and going out into the bay. And of course, out in the bay, we've got a thriving aquaculture industry with oysters and mussels, and that would be an ecological disaster for this particular bay.
To try to prevent that disaster, the community is trying a unique solution, building an artificial oyster reef just off the shoreline.
It's below the lowest low tide, so we can't see it right now, but it's right near the surface. And that oyster reef is built to break down the wave energy so that we're slowing down the water and wave impact. It's a biological feature that's actually going to grow over time because the oysters will grow, there'll be more oysters settle on them, and we'll slowly establish a nice living reef system that's going to protect this entire system for a long time.
The community knows this is just a start, but it's prepared to do whatever it takes to preserve their ancestral homelands.
There's a lot of history here, a lot of cultural activity and things like that. So it's really important that we not only protect this, but we protect the environment because this is our food source. This is where we have food, social, and ceremonial fisheries, and this is our future.
I look at the bigger picture and I say, what do I want to see in 100 years from now? And I see a thriving Mi'kmaq community, you know, with our lands intact. So we certainly do have a lot of work ahead of us.
All right, gonna put it in the air.
Coming up,
And we'll take some photos heading around the coast here.
measuring the toll erosion is taking on Prince Edward Island. Along Prince Edward Island's southwestern shore, the Cape Egmont Lighthouse has kept watch over the Northumberland Strait for 150 years. The lighthouse has already seen the impacts of its eroding cliffs. In 2000, it had to be moved further inland.
So, Catherine, when's the last time we were out here?
It would have been before Fiona, so a few months ago.
Yeah, I'm kind of curious to see what that storm did to us. It's quite vulnerable here.
Now, it's one of 200 sites around the island that Dr. Adam Fenich and his team from UPEI's Climate Lab monitor and measure every year, plotting the pace of the cliff's demise.
Where's our measuring pin that we need?
It'll be right around here.
Oh, there it is. Looks like a seagull left us a little present here. Nice oyster shell. All right, so we got to measure, see how much has eroded here. I'd really like to put in a
back pin.
Yeah, a line of sight point if we can.
The team drives metal stakes into the ground, using them as base points to measure each year's erosion. It's a kind of early warning system of what areas are most at risk.
Okay, Catherine, let's measure this side first.
Okay.
We conducted a study looking at what properties might be vulnerable looking into the future. And we came up with a number of over 1,000 homes and cottages are particularly vulnerable. 17 lighthouses, 45 square kilometers of roads around the island, and even wind turbines.
We're at about 10.8 meters there.
All right, and we'll get out and we'll get the drone out of the trunk.
The team has also begun flying drones over the most vulnerable shorelines. Andrew McDonald is their senior drone pilot.
This is one of the most western points on the island. It's obviously very exposed. There's no land anywhere nearby, so there's a lot of wave action here. So this is absolutely one of the areas on the west coast of P.E.I. that we focus on every year. There we go. All right, so there's our drone. Now we're gonna put the camera on.
It's a crucial tool in helping them scientifically chart the annual rate of erosion.
All right, gonna put it in the air. And we'll take some photos heading around the coast here. So we take a series of photos and we're able to do an erosion analysis essentially year to year, so we can get an idea for how much erosion is occurring at each site.
Although erosion has been a fact of life on Prince Edward Island for tens of thousands of years, Dr. Fenage says there is no doubt climate change is accelerating the rate of destruction.
It's so vulnerable here because we're just made out of sand and sandstone. Climate change is really making that much worse because the sea levels are rising, the land itself is falling a little bit, the storm activity has been changing. It's been increasing, the number of storms and especially the severity of storms. But probably most importantly is the seasonality of the sea ice. The ice used to surround Prince Edward Island for a long period of time, from about the end of November until well into April. But now we're lucky if we get about 6 weeks of ice. The ice acts like a protection. It insulates from the force of the waves that prevents the erosion from happening.
So we're just looking at a bit of the video we took at Cape Egmont Lighthouse.
The data collected in the field is studied and analyzed at the university's climate lab in St. Peter's Bay.
This is what's kind of the stitched together photo of the entire area. It's called an orthomosaic, and we can zoom in on the coastline. We will just draw the coastline by clicking our mouse, and you can do this within a few centimeters accuracy. We're able to put those coastlines into a software and generate very accurate results for the erosion occurring there. So if I take a look at the results here from 2016 to 2021, about 92 centimeters lost.
But the annual rate of erosion is just part of the story. It doesn't account for the havoc wreaked by big storms like Hurricane Fiona.
One of the areas we survey every year is a community called Savage Harbor on the North Shore. This is the imagery from last summer when we flew the area, and can kind of quickly check with this measuring tool that the distance from the coastline to this person's deck is in the area of 8 meters or so, and we can compare that to the imagery that we flew post-Fiona, and we can see that the coastline is now underneath their deck, essentially. We can do a measurement here and see that, yeah, about 8 meters or so has been lost in one storm, which is unprecedented for the work that we've been doing since 2016.
All right, so we're going to fly over Prince Edward Island.
To help islanders fully understand the perils facing coastal communities, the team used their data to create what they call a serious video game.
I'm flying us over to Victoria by the Sea, which is a quaint fishing village that's also a great tourism attraction. At current rates of coastal erosion, what would things look like over 30 years, 60 years, 90 years? So here's over 30 years, what the coast would look like. This is what 60 years, and here's after 90 years. And you can see that a large chunk out of Victoria by the Sea will be at the whims of coastal erosion unless there's something done about it. When we take it to communities around Prince Edward Island, it really shocks people when they can see what the vulnerability of their properties are to sea level rise and coastal erosion rates. I've even had people crying when we've shown this video game.
Coming up, the battle over the fight to save coastal homes and cottages.
Shorefront land isn't the cheapest land in P.E.I, it's the most expensive land in P.E.I, and you have to save it. It's going if you don't.
On a spectacular November morning, the tranquility of one of P.E.I.'s many pristine beaches is pierced by the sounds of heavy machinery. It's become a familiar sight. An excavator and bulldozer pile huge slabs of concrete to buttress the shoreline, armoring the land to try to slow erosion.
There's different options. You can haul the big bulky rock from the mainland. It's really expensive. There's concrete, and then there's also, if you can find the old island stone, it looks probably better, but it's also softer too. Concrete doesn't always look as great, but if you get it placed right, it's fine. It's hard. It'll last a long time.
Glenn Stewart has built a number of rock walls along this shore. Although this approach is controversial, he believes many homeowners have no choice.
This chap here hadn't have done what he did 3 years ago, he would have been back another 20 feet for sure. Like these cottages here, they would have been gone long ago. The shore takes a beating. Even when it's not stormy, the high moon tides come in at it pretty hard.
In the shadow of the Confederation Bridge, armoring is what Elaine Lord turned to try to protect her family's cottage rental business in Cape Traverse.
Mom and Dad started, the first cottage came here in 1977, and then the next cottage came 2 years later, the next cottage 2 years later, and then about 5 years after that, the back 5 cottages came. There's so much more water in the ocean, and the reason why I know this is because when I was a little girl, the tide would come up to about here, and this would all be dry sand, whether the tide was high or low. This was always dry sand. And now it's wet all the time, when the tide's out, when the tide's in.
But with the cliffs eroding away, Lord decided to act, spending $40,000 to armor her shoreline.
So this is what's left of the rock that I put down to help preserve my bank. I put fabric down as well.
Just 6 months later, a severe winter storm tore it all apart.
Perfect storm. It came in on the east, and it was the time of year where it was the highest tide of the year. And the winds were coming in over 100 kilometers, and the ocean rose up and came in. And it took a lot of land. And I come down to the shore, and I cried all day because my rock was gone.
While the storm destroyed her rock wall, it did save much of her land. Her neighbor, who decided not to armor, was not so lucky.
The ocean came up and moved in, and it was underneath his deck. He lost about 20 feet. And they told me that when I did the rock here, and my neighbor didn't, what happened was the ocean would hit the rock and cause a swirl like this, so it was actually making it worse for him. So, unfortunately, that's what happened.
Elaine Lord's experience is part of the reason why, for years, the provincial government discouraged people from building rock walls to armor their property.
Armoring is expensive. It costs a lot of money, and it's not a long-term solution.
Peter Nishimura is a senior climate change adaptation advisor for the province.
Armoring also is essentially a disruption to the natural processes that occur along the shore. So sediment movement along the shore, armoring will disrupt. It's also a change to the aesthetic of the seascape, and so we recognize that. And it can also impact habitat along the shoreline. Armoring installations can also deflect wave energy and impact adjacent properties that may not be protected.
Finally, in late 2022, as controversy erupted over the growing number and size of rock walls, the province invoked a moratorium, banning, at least for now, the construction of any new armoring projects.
It's not what we want to see. You know, it changes the aesthetic of P.E.I. shorelines, and so as a first alternative, we'd like to see people move back where they can.
This cottage over here used to be over here in front of these posts, and there used to be land in front of it, used to be a lot of trees, you could park some cars, and through the years it just got moved, and there used to be another place further up front. So over the years we've just been losing land.
Marcel Gallant knows all about moving back. In the 50 years his family has owned their land near Cape Egmont, they've had to move their cottages twice.
But this cottage over here, my parents, it used to be right over there, and we used to have the whole front, and again, it was a bunch of trees, and through the years, we moved it twice. It just seems to be getting worse. I mean, it seems like land is going, we're losing more and more every year.
With their cottages already moved right back to the road, Gallant knows it's only a matter of time before they lose it all.
30, 40 years from now, you won't be able to stay here. I mean, it's going to be nice to come over here, but you won't have hardly any land at all. It's not going to be for the future. We've got to enjoy it now while we can.
It's a sobering message, and as climate change continues to wreak havoc on our coastline, experts say it may be time for us to rethink our love affair with living right on the water.
People are resistant to change, and that's not just here on Prince Edward Island, but that's around the world. And a lot of people don't like to hear the bad news that their own home or cottage is being threatened by something that's totally beyond their control. But it's best not for us to hide our heads in the sand, but to realize what's going on.
I guess those of us that have the property, we love watching and looking at the sea. We love the sunsets that you get. There's nothing like it, which is why people all around the world buy shorefront properties and live on them. But with that, you have to accept Mother Nature and what Mother Nature can do. You have to accept the fact that you will have to give it up.
Where else would you want to be but here? You know, and Grampy walked here, and my dad walked here, and my mom walked here. Yeah, they all took their last walk here. So it's important to me.
I'm worried that it won't be here anymore, and it's going to be missed by a lot of people. I guess you don't know how much you're going to miss it until it's gone.